And welcome to the wrap-up of the 2020 African Film Festival Atlanta. The African Film Festival Atlanta is a signature event of the African Film and Arts Foundation, a non-profit media arts organization whose mission is to magnify and celebrate the visions, voices, lives, and stories of people from Africa and the African diaspora. Because of the NSAS movement in Nigeria, we decided our theme for the African Film Festival Atlanta this year would be celebrating Nigerian stories, excuse me, our way of contributing towards uplifting Nigeria. It's also befitting to wrap up the festival this year with a documentary about one of the most iconic people out of Nigeria, Fela Kuti. The documentary, My Friend Fela, is written and directed by Joel Zito Arrowwood and narrated by Fela's longtime friend, Carlos Moore. The film also features Sandra Isadore, Seun Kuti, Babatunde Banjoko, who was Fela's graphic artist, Labert Bethune, Lemi Garioku, Najite Mukoro, Ray Lema, and Tony Allen. Our live discussion today is with the executive producer, Luiza Almeida. Luiza, sorry, I couldn't get the middle name, but.
Okay, Luiza Botelho Almeida. I know it's a hard one.
Yeah, sorry about that. And activist and vocalist Sandra Izsadore featured in the documentary. With us also a special guest, Grammy-nominated vocalist Somi, cultural strategist Richard Dunn, and promotions and artist manager Bolaji Daodu. The conversation will be moderated by radio and TV translator Osei Kweku of V103 Atlanta. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction about our guest. Luiza Almeida is a Brazilian producer and screenwriter. She produced the film My Friend Fela, a documentary chronicling the legendary life of Fela Kuti. It won the 2019 African Movie Academy Award for the Best Diaspora Documentary. Currently, Luiza is a producer and co-owner of a production company in Brazil. Welcome, Luiza.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Sandra Isadore, who is featured in the documentary, and she's an African-American singer and activist featured in My Friend Fela and considered the mother of Afrobeat. She's best known for her association with Fela and having assisted in awakening his political consciousness, introducing him to books like Malcolm X, which helped shape his consciousness, particularly around African diaspora affairs. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you for having me, Miji.
You're welcome. Our next guest is Somi Kakoma. Born in Illinois to immigrants from Rwanda, Uganda, Somi is an acclaimed vocalist and songwriter. Her latest album, Holy Room, live at Alta Upa with Frankfurt Radio Big Band, was recorded in an 18th century German opera house in May 2019 and is currently nominated for a 2021 Grammy Award, excuse me, for Best Jazz Vocal Album. She is the first African woman ever nominated in any of the Grammy Jazz categories and the first African artist nominated in the Jazz Vocals category. So welcome, Somi.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Richard Dunn, and he's VP of Business Development for the Atlanta Voice, the largest audited African-American community newspaper in Georgia. He's an Atlanta native, serial entrepreneur, and driver of Atlanta's art and culture scene. Welcome, Richard. Our last guest, last but not the least, is Bolaji Daodu, who is also a board of directors of our foundation, the African Film and Arts Foundation. He's the CEO of World Audience Promotions, manager of some of the biggest musical acts out of Africa, including the King of Juju Music, King Sunny Ade. As a seasoned financial management professional and an attorney, Mr. Dawodu has over 30 years experience in the business of entertainment, locally and internationally. Welcome, Bolaji.
Thank you.
Our moderator for today is Osei Kweku, who I'm going to hand over in a minute. And he's an international on-air talent at #1 radio station in Atlanta, V103. Osei is also the creator of V103 International, the only station in the United States that has an active partnership with other radio stations in Africa, with a hyper focus in Nigeria with Beat 99.9, as well as the UK. So thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to hand you over now to Osei while I'm in the back end sorting out the issues we had in the back end. And also at the end, I'll come back on and we'll get questions from the audience. So enjoy. See you later.
Thank you, Moji. Appreciate you all taking the time so we could really have this conversation. I really enjoyed this film, My Friend Fela, and I really want us to have an open discussion. I thought it was kind of interesting, obviously, Luiza, coming from Brazil. I do know that Brazil, as it relates to, the largest population of Africans, outside of sub-Saharan Africa, Brazil holds that honor. And so I obviously know that there's a connection, but for you on a personal level, why did you make this film? Why did you want to get involved in making this film?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having us here, for showing the film and holding this discussion. It's so nice to have so many great guests and be able to, that's what we all want, right? When we make a film, we want to be able to talk about it and have people discuss it. So this is a great question. The film came to us through Carlos Moore. So to give you a little bit of a background, Joel, who is the director, who's also my business partner at our company, he is African Brazilian.
Oh, I lost sound.
For making a lot of films that discuss not only race, but discuss the place of the African diaspora. And Carlos Moore always felt that he needed to set the record straight. There's a lot of films and there's a musical, a lot of products made about Fela. And Carlos, as a close friend and his official biographer, he always felt like there needed to be a film that showed Fela from his perspective. This perspective of a man that was not just an exotic musician, he was also, he was very political and he was very mindful in everything that he did. So when Carlos came across Joel's work, he immediately fell in love with the way that Joel is able to bring the conversation and strike discussions about race in a very risque way, I would say. And because of that, he got in contact with Joel and he presented the idea. We fell in love with the project because it falls like a glove with everything that we do and we believe in. And then the rest is history. But that's a question that everybody asks. It's like, why is a Brazilian director making a film about a Nigerian guy and, travel? But that's how it came about.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand it. And I feel like music has no boundaries. I wanted to ask you, Sandra, I thought it was very powerful seeing you, just kind of recount and tell your story. And I thought, obviously, there's a lot of influence there. What was that like, just initially, meeting Fela when he reached the US? And did you see him becoming the individual that he eventually morphed into or grew into?
Actually, I saw him do a metamorphosis. What I didn't realize at the time that I met Fela, because he was going to be my African king, the one that was going to teach me about Africa. Because at that point in my life, I realized that everything that I had been taught was a lie. That is, from the religious standpoint and from the academic. So we had been lied to. And I felt that the only way that I was going to get the truth was to actually speak to someone from Africa. And when I met Fela, I thought, oh my, this is it. He's gonna teach me all about my ancestry, because I recognized that there was a link between myself and Africa. I realized that very early in life, and as I speak about it in my book, Fela and Me. Um, so that was my experience with Fela. When I met him, he was Fela Ransom Kuti. He later became Fela Anikulapo Kuti. And I'd like to say Fela came to America with colonial mentality, but when he left America, he was definitely a Black man.
I like it. I like that a lot. I wanted to kind of, go around the circle. Mr. Dawodu, I wanted
Yes.
to kind of get your perspective, having been so involved in the music on a global scale and
Yeah.
understanding, because I feel like there's still a bit of confusion in terms of understanding Fela being somewhat like what Bob Marley is to reggae music. He is, I know we make the differentiation between Afro beats and Afrobeat, but we know that it is certainly born from what was created with him and a lot of that energy. But do you feel as if, during his time, the music could have taken on the same impact that reggae had, what reggae eventually grew into? Did you see Afrobeat perhaps having that type of dominance during, his lifetime?
Yeah, well, during those times, is completely different time compared to now. However, those days, if Fela just seems like a personality that is very focused on the struggle of his people. I don't think he's more thinking of more establish his name global wide. I think the idea that he loves his people, he decided to go back home, even after spending time in UK and so on. His focus is more on justice, truthfulness. He has a lot of energy to do that. So therefore, I don't think in his mind, he's thinking more of Bob Marley type. Bob Marley have his style of music, but I just think he just focused more on Africa. Of course, the name becomes a global recognition, but I think at the time, he see the injustice, he see the suffering of his people, and he's really focused on trying to do the best he can to change some of that. I think that's showing his music. Most of the music are more, governmental related, social issue, etc. So I think that probably why, rather than focus on more, other part of the world.
Absolutely. Somi, I wanted to, get your thoughts, because I know you being born in Illinois, like myself, I'm first generation in this country. And I think that's oftentimes a very unique and interesting perspective. Obviously, you've accomplished a lot. And, I know you even remade Fela's Lady. So for you, what does he mean to you as an artist? What type of inspiration do you draw from his story? I think you're on mute.
I think Fela, he represents a sort of contemporary African voice, a sort of fearlessness of African contemporary music that I think before the 70s, we weren't seeing that much of, right? There was this kind of, actually, let me back up. I would say there's Miriam Makeba. I would even say Baba Olatunji, Drums of Passion, but for me, the very first person to kind of hold space on the global cultural stage for African people and music was Miriam Makeba. But I think that Fela is a direct sort of, beneficiary in many ways of that space that she was making for so many African voices, diverse African voices, voices who can. So I actually thought it was interesting in the film that Carlos Moore spoke about Miriam Makeba being a part of that kind of Pan-Africanist stance that they took at the UN. But I think to me, Fela represents a certain freedom, a certain fearlessness, a certain willingness to kind of find an original voice, you know, an original sound. You know, there's something so original about what he was doing. Not only because he was choosing to use his platform as a popular musician to speak truth to power and on that side, but because he really also was deeply invested in the art and how that framed the message, right? Because I think if you can disarm people with a certain type of beauty, a certain type of creativity, a certain type of artistry, you know, that is what gets people to actually listen to what you have to say, right? The music had to actually measure up to the message. And so to me, I'm deeply inspired by that, by artists like himself, like Miriam Makeba, like Hugh Masekela, like that kind of lineage of folks who are willing to tell the truth, but also have a fiercely original sound. And I think that's something that inspires me greatly as a songwriter and as an artist and as an African woman.
Absolutely. Dunn, I know we talk a lot about this connection between Africa and African Americans. And I think that, you know, just in understanding, even with the relationship with Sandra, there's so many, you know, powerful elements that I was really, really enlightened on. But what were your thoughts, you know, as you kind of got familiar or more familiar with Fela in this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, from a musical perspective, definitely have always been a fan and, you know, always kind of been able to watch his influence over my peers in the music business. And you know, so his influence on the American soul culture, dancing, house music, even more recently, the reemergence of sonically, you can feel his spirit in hip hop now, you know, and it's pretty prevalent. But to learn as much as I did about him as a man and his personal story, I can be honest and say, you know, his tone of a revolutionary is obvious in his music, but the struggles and the things that he personally kind of had to endure speaking and singing such music was very impactful and very eye-opening to me. I can't believe that he survived those attacks and his music lives on. And so to me, his music is even now more special than what it was. And I like the comparisons to Malcolm X and Dr. King that the film gave him. It made me even think of Tupac, you know, just someone that I knew personally and in my generation, how his messaging was and how tragic his him losing his life was, and how much his voice could have been used and needed in today's time in particular, you know. So it really hit home watching that documentary. I think they did a great job with the film.
Absolutely. Yeah, I felt the same way. And I feel like there's a strong correlation between Fela's story and just hip hop as a whole. So I definitely agree with what you said as relates to Tupac and just hip hop in terms of just being the voice of the people and the oppressed. And I really was, one of the things, Sandra, that really blew me away. I know that, you know, Fela probably had it already in his DNA, but you mentioned the colonization of perhaps his mindset when he came to the US. And I know that that's across the continent, just because whether you're speaking about, you know, the English speaking countries or the French speaking countries and the oppression that has taken place on the continent. What was it like when you gave him that book? I have to ask, because I know I always find that when people tell me about their experience, their interaction with the autobiography of Malcolm X is really a pivotal point for people. Now, I know his mother was certainly highly politically active, but he may not have found the lane that he may have wanted to occupy, so to speak, in his life yet at that time. Because I feel like any first generation Africans, or not even first generation, say my parents coming to the US, you're trying to figure out how to fit in. How do you make it work for yourself here? And I was curious, because you knew him on an intimate level, what those conversations might have been like, and maybe, you know, maybe some of the things that led up to you even giving him that book. You know, what prompted you to give him the autobiography of Malcolm X? I'd like to hear that.
Well, I talk about it in my book, Fela and Me.
Right.
But what made me give him the Malcolm X book was because Fela had said something that was very offensive to me, because being born here in America, reared in America, and trying to seek and search for truth, because I know that the things that they told me about myself and the visual pictures that they showed me of myself, they did not make me feel good. So I knew that my answer lied within Africa. So having met Fela, I just knew that all the answers were going to be revealed. But what made me give him the book was when Fela talked about how stupid Africans were. He said, Africans are so stupid. And when he said that, now here it is, a young girl believing in the fairy godfather, and that all the things that she had been told were lies. For him to say something like that to me, that Africans were stupid, it was shattering. So I became very passionate and very animated and went off, to be exact. So at that point, I started showing him documentation. I showed him documentations of me at rallies. He saw a picture of me in the newspaper where I'm fighting. He saw all the African kings and queens on my wall. And then this is when I started to break everything down to him and gave him the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Okay. I feel like, and the reason I brought that up is I think on both continents, there's a lot of misinformation given to all of us as it relates to who we are. And I feel like it's quite contrary to who he obviously evolved into, because the person that he became he became a giant, literally, and was certainly willing to put it all on the line. You know, and even, you know, Luiza, just understanding, I mean, would you say that Fela's music, even as relates to Brazil, because a lot of people, you know, you mentioned Joel being an Afro-Brazilian, and even Carlos, when I was fascinated by Carlos Moore's story and just how that connection came about, because I always find it to be kind of interesting that he at one time protected Malcolm X and then became so close to Fela. And I was kind of just wondering if anybody, you know, wants to speak on what they thought that relationship was like. I'm sure, Sandra, you could give some real insight on that, but I felt like the relationship that Carlos and Fela had was pretty amazing. And I understand that he probably had a lot of reverence for Carlos because he worked so closely with revolutionaries like Malcolm. The one scene that really, it kind of touched my spirit was watching Carlos walk into the airport with Malcolm. I think it was shortly before Malcolm was killed. And I found that to be it almost made me tear up, because it seemed like Malcolm knew that he was going home, and it seemed like he might be going home to meet, you know, his death. And, you know, I found that to be very amazing. And not to mention, I was saying that, I was like, wow, Carlos was one of the darkest Cubans I've ever seen. And when he said he was a Cuban revolutionary, I loved it, because I feel like the whole colorism thing that we experience on the continent, as well as in Latin America, is very real. And it doesn't necessarily get the type of attention or conversation that, you know, I think it deserves. And I think there's so many conversations that Black people have to have, you know, even outside of this, but it begins to get those things going, even as it relates to just having the pride and what have you. So I found that, you know, Carlos was a really fascinating person to kind of tell this story as it relates to Fela. And I wanted to kind of just hear more. I wish he was here, clearly, but I wanted to just kind of hear more, you know, about everybody's thoughts on Carlos, because I thought that's very deep. And I know the Cuban revolutionary part has got to be a story in and of itself. So I can only imagine the conversations he and Fela were having. I mean, can y'all elaborate on that? Anybody want to speak on it?
Well, I can tell you this. Carlos and Fela are both I would say, alphas. They're both alphas. And I met Carlos Moore, and I speak about it once again in my book, Fela and Me. That weekend in Paris, boy, what a weekend. And the thing that at that time, Carlos was living in Paris, France. It was Fela who introduced me to Carlos Moore. Maybe a lot of people don't know that at one point, Carlos was actually the manager for Fela. I think he may have been managing him at the time that I met him. I'm not quite sure on that part, but I do know that was the weekend that Carlos Moore interviewed Fela. So Carlos Moore's book, Fela Sesputain, the first book that was written, which later on became Fela This Bitch of a Life, the English translation that is, that all that information was of the wives and myself was gathered that weekend in Paris.
Wow.
And you also mentioned, which I'd like to talk about here, because after meeting Fela and being in the Fela camp, I was also introduced to reggae. And when I was blessed to be in the company, in the studio with Bob Marley. So I feel like I have been in the connection and crossed paths with two major giants. You spoke of Bob's music being international and worldwide, even into the bush of Africa. So yes, this journey of truth, and I think that's one of the reasons of my alignment with Bob Marley. Bob was already doing it. Fela, with the introduction and through me, he was able to start singing about relevant things that affected the masses in this world, rather than the way it's been done of late. I would say within the past, 20, 30 years. Prior to that, Fela used the phrase, and that phrase was, music is the weapon. And when he came here saying music is the weapon, I believe America heard him, but they heard him in the worst sort of ways. And America started putting out music and producing music that was destructive for Black people. So, and that's the music that they pushed, and that's the music that became popular. And there's plenty of documentations in reference to that. And board meetings, how they were saying the Black music was too powerful and they needed to do something about it. Record company executives, the big six. But anyway, I'll rest my case on that.
Okay.
Osei, I think that there are a few interesting things to kind of tie into the conversation. Earlier, we talked about the journey that Fela went from saying that Africans are stupid to becoming who he is through the guidance and the enlightenment of Sandra. But one thing that I find interesting is Carlos and Fela also bonded for many reasons, but also because Carlos also had that. And I can say from, perspective of Brazil, I see that also happens in Brazil. And now we have this counter culture of rethinking and questioning these colonization thoughts. And for Carlos, the Sandra for Carlos was Maya Angelou, which also makes Carlos an even more interesting character, right? Like he's just this incredible person that just has so many stories. His life has been touched by so many important references. And so it's interesting to see. And also, as we're making the documentary, it was very interesting to see how Carlos has such a big impact, and also Fela has a big impact on Carlos's life. It's a mutual connection, to the point that it was a door opener. So whenever we mention Carlos's names, the families, the family members, the people that worked with Fela, everybody was very warm to help the film and to participate, because they knew that Carlos was so close to Fela that he was actually wanting, he was kind of on the same page as what Fela would like to be, the story to be told about him. And one thing that we're very happy about is when the film premiered in Brazil, the film actually premiered, the world premiere was at the Rotterdam Film Festival. But when it finally got to Brazil, Carlos came to the screening, and once the credits, it was the first time that he watched the film, and once the credits went up, he walked up to the stage and he was pointing at Joel and saying, "You did it, you know, you did it. You told the story that I thought needed to be told." So that was very gratifying for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on the NSARS movement. Obviously, a lot of the things that Fela experienced and endured are still taking place to this day. I think one of the things, obviously, with it taking place in Africa is that, you know, the individuals who are perpetuating the abuse look just like us. But the thought process as it relates to policing and what it is in America with Black Lives Matter, and now when we talk about NSARS and just the whole, the spirit of protest, I wanted to kind of see what everyone's thoughts were as it relates to, you know, the NSARS movement, as you know, as well as Black Lives Matter. And whoever wants to speak first on that, certainly feel free.
Well, you know, it's very, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it's okay. What I was going to just say is I think it's encouraging to see young artists using their platform to speak about the issues. I think they're greatly inspired by people like Fela Kuti and others. So, you know, seeing, I think Falz the Bad Guy was very vocal about the protests. Seeing Seun Kuti as well. Seun has been very vocal about it, but he's, you know, often talks about these issues, which is wonderful to see him kind of stand in his father's light in that way and be able to raise consciousness and conversations around those issues beyond NSARS movement, but also, of course, NSARS. I think that it was so important. It was such a, it was so moving to see so many young people literally lay their lives on the line. And to see how a lot of the artists, a lot of Nigerian artists, and I would say even people beyond Nigeria, used their platform and understood the value of celebrity. And I think that's actually the thing, that the final quote, the end of the film, when Fela is talking about, I need people to understand I'm not an entertainer, right? He's here for greatness. He's in pursuit of what it is to be a great Black man, right? And he wants people to understand a certain type of message. I was very moved by that last quote, you know, because thinking about even like the tragic side of him, right? The things that Carlos and I would say even yourself, Sandra, the things that made you have quite a bit of concern over who he had become, right? And who he was becoming, you know, towards the end of his life. I thought it was interesting to then come back to saying who he was, what he really was trying to do was just contribute a certain type of greatness, contribute a certain type of message. And so I think that was a beautiful thing, just to tie back to your question, in terms of the NSARS, it's like that people were able to move beyond the celebrity and really talk about an issue, right? Whatever people's motivations are for participating in that conversation is another conversation, but I do think it does put forward the right message of, you know, let's actually be responsible with the platforms that we have, and let's raise and have these conversations and hold people accountable. And so, you know, I know things have died down in Nigeria, but I'm hoping that it does make an impactful and sustainable change.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to say, because it's very emotional for me, because I recognized a long time ago, until Africa was free, the rest of us in the diaspora were not going to be free. So, Somi, in 1969 was when I first became aware, when it was a boom in Nigeria. Nigeria was booming and bursting with opportunity. Opportunity was everywhere. And at that time, as a revolutionist, I was there. This is a time for change. This is a time to build. And Fela, he too saw and heard. And I think at that time, he was the only one hearing. And I remember going into the telegraph office, because that's where we had to go to make phone calls. Well, Fela had a phone in his house, but if you really wanted good phone service, you went there. And I remember seeing this sign, "Keep Nigeria's Secrets." You know, and it really didn't, you know, bother me at that time. But today I see why Nigeria wanted her secrets kept. And in SARS, you know, these are things, what's happening in Nigeria today was happening in 1969. What I find, Nigerians are the most educated people on planet Earth. They hold more PhDs, more master's degrees. But why is it that Black people, no matter where you go throughout the diaspora, are on the bottom of the rung, and especially in Nigeria? Well, you know, I have a problem with that. Okay, I've seen some improvements, yes, but as far as Nigerian artists being real and singing about, there's none that have followed really in Fela's footsteps, except maybe, and I've listened to quite a few. Right now, the only one that I know that's bringing it and bringing it hard is M. Josh. Aragons is another young upcoming artist who, you know, he's trying, and with my support. Another artist there, and then, you know, Nigeria have a whole lot of artists, because I'm telling you, if the Nigerian artists are ever allowed to 100% capacity in the American market, they will take it over, because they are very creative. I mean, they are good beyond America. But, you know, what I'm saying is I realize now that I'm way ahead of my time, because America is just now catching up to where I was in 1969. So.
Understood. You know, I wanted to speak on one more point as it relates to the political side of what I felt the film was you know, certainly highlighting. And I think that we're just now coming out of this most recent election, you know, and I wanted to ask you all's thoughts on how important you see democracy in 2020, when you look at the progression from what Fela was experiencing, what he went through, and even, you know, what many might consider the fight for very basic things. You know, he seemed to suffer quite a bit on a day-to-day basis just for speaking his mind. And obviously the song Zombie was a turning point, but we find that even in 2020, we are perhaps looking at that as a whole when you talk about society, and just kind of blindly following whatever may be put before us, just because we don't know. But how important is democracy now, and what is necessary in terms of being able to retain democracy on a level the way we've experienced it, particularly in America, because it seems like everybody looks at America as the ultimate dream. But I would say over the last, you know, 4 years, and certainly over the last 10 years with everything that's been happening here, it highlighted some things that may not have been, some uncomfortable truths. Let's just put it that way, some very uncomfortable truths. But if anybody wants to speak on that, by all means.
I'm not really sure about democracy per se. I think this election has showed us that democracy is not designed for people of color to win. You know, so America's not designed for that. I think that there is a undertone that should be brought to the forefront of terms of people of color and those of African descent, and that is things like this, conversation and exposure, right? So I grew up in Atlanta, born and raised. My grandfather was thick in the civil rights movement, so I'm well aware of all my former slaves and the things that they did to turn things around for people who were born in America. But I can admit to having all the wrong imagery of Africa growing up. You know, for me, it was always the feed the hungry, poor African kids with the flies on the face, and you know, in all these images. And so we really never desired were never taught the importance of Africa, and to that point, desire to go and visit and learn more about their culture and understand the importance of Africa. I think the educational system did a great job of diffusing that, and to the elder's point, how well educated the people are in Nigeria. And I'm experiencing that now because the Nigerian African culture here in Atlanta is so prominent, and I'm starting to have real relationships with people who are, you know, first generation American, or are only in America to go to school, right? And so now that the cultures are starting to mix, I'm open to so much more. And I think it's so really, it's really important that people of color start to build these bridges amongst ourselves. I think the more we do that, we'll find the key and the solution, and we'll take control of our destiny moving forward with or without democracy. You know, the revolution continues. I just think it changes. The game has changed and the playing field has changed. And I think it's we gotta pull our own triggers. You know what I mean? I think that we are too reactionary to stuff. You know, they poke at us and then we march and we burn, and, you know, screw that. Like, what's our game plan and what do we want for ourselves, and let's go get it. Like, we have the resources, we definitely have the influence of the culture and things that people that look like everybody on this call, when we do stuff, it impacts the world. We got little white kids and Asian kids, people all over the world rapping and doing breakdancing, and you know what I mean? So they're mimicking what we're doing in the ghetto. They're mimicking what we're doing in the project. So our influence is there. I think if it's just a little bit more organized and structured, we can create the world that we want moving forward. And maybe not our generation, but definitely exposing the youth that we all influence to kind of go across the sea a few times. They'll figure it out for us, you know. So I think that's the play. I'm not, to your first question though, brother, I don't know about democracy. Definitely going to vote though. You can't make a difference if you don't participate. So I'm not saying sit on the sideline. I'm saying show up and vote and work the system as it is, but we got to recreate our own system.
And not only that, we need to not only watch mainstream media, but you need to do some background research and checking the notes and everything that's going on in the back, because mainstream media, remember, all of these organizations, NBC, CBS, ABC, they have program directors. And what I have discovered, those program directors are controlled by a higher source that is programmed. It's there to program the society to think a certain way. And right now, they programmed in the earlier years, they had Black people thinking that they were subservient and white people thinking they were superior. And it all had to do with television, radio, the airwaves, what the people were receiving. That's why it is important not to get stuck with mainstream media, because they will make you a sheeple. And I'm very passionate about this because, see, here it is, 50 years later, and I'm thinking by now we would be at another level and we still back at square one. What's wrong with that picture? Yeah, so I'm a little bit angry about it too. Democracy. Oh, as Fela would say, them all crazy. Okay.
Well,
Mr. Dawodu, go ahead, bro.
Yes, I mean, I always thinking Black folks in general around the world should pretty much come together as one. I know we're not monolithic, everybody think differently. But there's a reason why, for instance, in UK, Nigeria is a British colonized, but you have to get visa to go to UK. In the United States, you get a lot of Europeans that can come here without visa. But most of the Black nation, even some of the Caribbean countries, they have to get visa to come here. And I think it's by design, because the more we multiply here, the more, Africans or Caribbeans comes here, have children, and their offspring have children. They run for political office. Now we are part of this system. And by trying to minimize the number of people that comes here, then the less of us. So, but those of us that have been here for a while, we need to connect with our brothers and sisters that are here and just look at each other as African people, as one people. And maybe there's a way to connect, to do business with each other, to do connection with each other, to assist each other, because that goes a long way. Because if you help me, I help another brother and sister, and they pass it on. Otherwise, some of the association that I belong to, I see one racial folks doing things together. They don't even have to know each other intimately. They help each other. I have one of my guy that was helping me with production from one of the Yugoslavia countries. This guy came here, right here in Atlanta, does not know a soul. And he was looking for work and so on. What I found out later on, he was able to secure a position that somebody else has been looking for, and without knowing anybody. But his brother and sister help him out. We don't do that. And I think that's one of the problems. I always think there's power in numbers. The more people, then the more we can have power. In the political process too, you need numbers, number of people to vote so you can elect people. But for some reason, we tend to look at each other as this one is African-American, this one is African, this one is Caribbean, and all this division create issues. Where other folks, for instance, the Hispanics, they tend to look at them as an Hispanic rather than from Puerto Rico or from some of the Latin American countries. So, and I've seen this a lot, and I wonder why we are not as a bloc to kind of do things in this multi hodgepodge country where everybody come here from somewhere, or their ancestry come here from somewhere and trying to make it here. So, but everybody have their own side. So anyway, I'm very passionate about that too, because I see my brother and sister kind of do their own thing. This one do their own thing, and we never really get anywhere.
I wanted to ask something, Mr. Dawodu. I know, Luiza, you have to leave. You have to, leave. But it's important that this film is obviously sparking a lot of conversation, right? And I wanted to make sure that we got from you the distribution plans for my friend Fela, like, where other people may be able to, engage the film, and, how this whole thing really, came together as far as the cast and, you just pulling certain specific people. But what are the distribution plans as it relates to it?
Well, go ahead.
So right now we're at the very end of the tail run of festivals. We sold the film to PBS in the US, and we would love to be on streaming. We're on streaming in Brazil, in a few different platforms, including Google Play and several others, but not in the US. So we would love to be able to be more available streaming in the US as well.
Okay. Are there, do you have any other upcoming film plans that are getting ready to be released or that we can look forward to?
We do. We just shot, we're in post-production of our next feature film, which is actually going to be a fiction. And it's called Rita's Father, O Pai da Rita in Portuguese. Shot in Brazil. It's a very light, fun story of two samba musicians who are in their late 60s. They share a studio together. They're kind of like almost married, but they're straight. And all of a sudden their friendship comes very close to falling apart because they meet the daughter of the love of their life, Rita. And then they start fighting over her paternity. So it's a very lighthearted, fun story that, you know, follows our path and our brand, which is to bring light to race, but in a very different way, from the very opposite of My Friend Fela. My Friend Fela is very political, very straight to the point and harsh, and this one is just light, a light story that shows protagonists, you know, African Brazilian protagonists that are not involved in drugs or anything. They're just samba players, and it's fun.
Yeah.
So Rita's father. It will be coming out next year.
Okay. All right. I thank you for that. I wanted to make sure we highlighted a lot of the things that kind of allowed this film to be here. I think it's a great film that can spark a lot of discussions that are really necessary. And, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of peel some things back. Moji, are we, I know if I'm seeing you there, maybe are we running out of time?
Almost.
I know,
yeah, because I know some people have to hop off.
Okay.
So quick question, Luiza, do you have to hop off as well? So two quick questions from the audience is budget, which I know a lot of filmmakers don't like talking about. And one of your most memorable moments of making the documentary.
They asked what the budget was for the documentary. A little bit under $500,000.
Okay.
So it's short, but you know, it's tight. It's very tight when you're shooting in 3 different countries, and you know. And I would like to, you know, take this opportunity to thank all of our sponsors in Brazil. The Brazilian government right now is falling apart because we have a terrible president that is trying to just demolish all of culture. But thankfully we were able to raise the funds before he came into power. And you know, that goes to show why it's so important to have funding system available for filmmakers to be able to tell important stories. So I wanna take this time to thank our sponsors. And then your second question was
a memorable moment.
Memorable moment.
Yeah, of the documentary.
Oh my goodness, there were so many memorable moments. The meeting of Sandra and Carlos, which thankfully we caught on camera, was so memorable because they had not seen each other. That was not staged. They had not seen each other in how long? Decades.
Ooh, it was years.
Years. And
yeah,
yeah, so we held Carlos in the van, and you know, got all the cameras ready, and we only brought Carlos up to her house after we were running, you know, we're shooting, so it was actually caught on camera. It was a very emotional moment. And then the second, if I may tell 2 stories.
Sure.
The second one was that I find is just very, very funny, is that that director was actually arrested in Nigeria.
Not surprising.
This is a behind the camera, you know, no one knows, but you know, since people are here for the juicy stories, I might as well tell it. We were shooting, and I actually, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go because all of our visas were denied to go to Nigeria. It was this big thing. We lost all the tickets, and after pleading and doing all that we could, we finally got permission just for the director and Carlos to go. So we weren't able to take any crew or anything in Nigeria. And at some point during a break at the shooting, the director was just, you know, voyeur, artistic, you know, walking around the streets, looking, just gathering some images. And he sees this church, and he thought the church was really pretty. So he decides to take a picture of the church. And he didn't realize that there were 2 cops in front of the church. And as soon as they saw him taking a picture, they stopped him, and they were like, "Why are you taking a picture?" And he was like, "Oh no, I'm making a film." Then things got even worse, but he was just so, you know, director, not thinking. And next thing he knows, he's in jail. Oh, and wow. Our local producer, yes, our local producer was able to get him out, but it was not a very pleasant, very memorable, but not very pleasant moment.
Those moments usually aren't.
Yeah, so the, you know, rule of thumb, if you're in Nigeria, you see a church, don't take a picture, you know.
Don't take a picture.
Just don't, it'll be okay.
That reminds me of a time when I was in Nigeria, and I was there with Adrian Booth. And Adrian was taking pictures. Adrian was taking pictures. He was there for Island Records. And at that time, there was a general near us I didn't know. And they were very offended about the same situation. And me being very vocal, we got out of it. We didn't get arrested. We were out of it because I think I mentioned Fela's name. Fela's name had a lot of power. So he didn't get arrested, but he was so angry with me because I didn't realize the man was, you know, the army, and I'm talking so much mess. But you know, you can always laugh at it after, but when you're in it, it is not funny.
Yep. No, imagine the desperation, you know, like I get the phone call, I'm in the US, and I'm like, oh my God. All of a sudden we're just, you know, the director is arrested. That's done in Nigeria.
Yeah. Okay, so if you need to hop off, just let me know. Do you need to go now?
I'm okay.
Oh, yeah, okay, cool. So this question is from me, I know as a Nigerian, we all have our stories of when we first encountered Fela. So I'll start with you, Somi. Can you remember your first experience of encountering Fela and what that was like?
Well, firstly, I'll say I actually have to hop off, but I'm going to answer this question. So I thank you for asking me first. The first time I encountered Fela's music, I was probably 22, you know. And I think as an East African, we didn't really grow up listening to Fela. You know, most people, you know, most of my Nigerian or even Ghanaian friends were very aware of Fela from a very young age. You know, and I assume some like Francophone West Africans as well. Mm-hmm. And actually, it was a man. But I was having like a dinner party at my apartment in Harlem, and a friend of mine from St. Croix, his brother from St. Croix, was like, "Do you have any Fela?" And I was like, "Who's that?" Which is crazy now, but you know, and then he put it on, and of course, then began my love affair with his music and discovery of everything that he stood for. And his story. So, you know, Fela, then there was also this time, I was fortunate to be in New York at this time when there was sort of this discovery of his music happening in like a kind of in the hipster space, if you will, which, you know, sometimes people look at that as a bit problematic, like who ends up endorsing the music, representing the music. And so there were 2 people who were really kind of pushing it forward. I want to say Rich Medina was doing a weekly party at this spot in the meatpacking district. And it became like the hottest thing, like to get in, and he just played Fela all night, jumping funk.
Right.
Oh yeah. Mm.
It started really with him doing this thing at the apartment. It was called The Apartment, I think, the club. Anyway, I digress. And then it sort of shifted to SOBs with jumping funk. I'm new to Atlanta, everybody. Hey, so I'm gonna cook all these New York things instead. But then, and then there was a band. This is maybe prickly, but anyway, there was a band, Antibalas.
Antibalas, yeah.
Right, that's them.
Were playing in a small venue called No More in Tribeca, and growing this like devoted fan base in Lower Manhattan. Now, there's one Naija guy at the front sometimes, but for the most part, it's a predominantly white band from Brooklyn, you know, so it's a complicated, I'll say it's complicated, you know, for all kinds of reasons, you know, in terms of being adorned like the carriers of Fela's torch, which I think a lot of people in the quote unquote world music space were speaking about them as such, and still do to this day, which doesn't necessarily feel good when you're talking about Black music and an African man who was fiercely proud of being a Black man and fiercely proud of Pan-Africanist storytelling. Anyway, so I think that those two things, you know, then coupled with Bill T. Jones creating it kind of then evolved, the trajectory moved towards Bill T. Jones doing the off-Broadway piece, inspired by what later became, you know, clear that it was inspired by Carlos Moore's book, This Bitch of a Life, and then went to Broadway. And I think obviously by the time it reaches Broadway, it's like much wider consciousness. You know, you're talking beyond like the hipster space, beyond the like culturalist space, you're talking in a mainstream space. And so it was really interesting to witness that trajectory for me personally, remembering when I first heard the music in New York, but then after, it was almost like once you hear it and once you're aware, then you realize how much it's actually in the atmosphere. You know, and so, yeah, shout out to Jamaki Knight, the brother who introduced me to that music. And you know, it's wonderful to then be here and know we can have a conversation and that people know exactly who you're talking about, you know.
Yes.
Okay.
And on that, I'm just gonna say, I thank you so much for holding space. I thank you for this warm welcome to the A.
And before you hop off, Somi, some inspiring words for upcoming creatives, and then you're allowed to go.
I would just say, you know, follow your heart, be honest with yourself, and people will feel that truth.
Right.
And always represent yourself in your fullest way, you know.
Okay, thank you very much, Somi. I know it was all last
Thank you for the beautiful film. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for the conversation. Love.
Okay. All right, so going to you, Luiza, your first encounter with Fela's music. Do you have a story?
Goodness.
Was it this documentary?
I mean, you know, before the documentary, I had encountered Fela's music a lot, just at home with my parents. But I would say that once I read Carlos's book, that's when I can say that I encountered Fela, because I think that Fela is so much more than his music. What he used to say, I don't make love music, I make revolutionary music. Like, it's not, don't make it for entertainment. And before I read the book, before I got to know more about Fela, you know, it's amazing music. It's undeniable. He's a genius. But once I was able to align his music with his purpose and what he was really about, that's when I would say that I got to know Fela, and that's really, like, for me, that is the biggest heartwarming part about Fela, is just what he was about and what he fought about and what he believed in. and what he devoted his life to, right? Like he was just, he suffered the consequences of fighting for freedom and equality. So.
Is it popular in Brazil?
Recently, it's becoming more and more popular. It was not popular like 10 years ago. It was not popular, and that's the funny thing, because Brazil is very similar. It has we have 54% of the population is Black, declared 54%, but we're so mixed that the percentages are bigger. And all of that population is just so suppressed. You know, we have so much racism, we have so much inequality, it's just so terrible. It relates so closely with all of the lyrics of Fela. So it's now that it's becoming more and more popular, it's like in the film, you know, it's like, oh, this music, it sounds like it was made today. Like it relates to exactly what Africans are going through all over the diaspora, right, today. So,
which is pretty amazing, that a song that he made in the 70s and we're in 2020 and it's still like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You, Richard, can you remember your first encounter with Fela's music or anything to do with Fela?
Yeah, absolutely. In a used to be sacred musical ground here in Atlanta called Yin Yang Cafe. My brother DJ Kemet definitely was probably the person to put me onto it, and you know, Salah and Musiki Scales, and first time I actually watched the band kind of recreate his music live. So those brothers, and in particular, the Yin Yang, and the event that Kemet used to have called Revival, and now he does the Felabration.
Yeah.
That's an amazing event and a great tribute to Fela's music. Yeah.
And you, Bolaji, your first encounter?
Oh, wow.
I want to hear this story.
Well, growing up in Nigeria, you know, we all revere Fela music.
Yeah.
Even I was much younger then, but we all think of him as an icon. It's just larger than life. I remember one time when Fela actually, during those days, a Mercedes 230 was the car then. You know, it was the car of the wealthy and so on. And I remember there's a street called Broadway and Marina. There's a shop there called Kingsway. It's a very popular shop.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah, I remember that.
And Fela actually drove this car, a brand new Mercedes-Benz, that's the best at that time. And he put all kind of rubbish on top of it, you know, all kind of trash on top of it, and drove around Kingsway. So as a way to say to a lot of corrupt folks that all this stuff doesn't mean anything. And it becomes a lot of people start coming to that square just to look at it. But moving forward, in United States, August 17, 1991, yes, a friend of mine was actually promoting Fela, and he asked me, Fela is going to be, I said, Fela, I said, you mean I'm going to be able to meet Fela? I said, no, that's not going to happen. He said, don't worry. So we promote the show. It's at the Masquerade in Atlanta. It was Masquerade. I think they turned the building out now, or they changed the name. But anyway, It was the Masquerade by North Avenue there. And so we promote the show, and so the friends said, well, come up and meet Fela. And that night, there was a good friend of mine. It was a lady from Senegal, very beautiful lady. And so she came, she said, can meet Fela too? I said, come on with me. So we went upstairs, and we were in this dark room in the bar, in the back. And, you know, as everybody knows, Fela love women. So this lady, you know, very curvy, very nice lady and so on. She's very jovial too. So we get up there. I was greeting Fela. Instead of him focusing on me to talk about the show, the promotion, he said, is this lady with you? I said, yeah, she's my friend. She's going to New York. And I'm wondering if she can ride on the bus with you to New York. And she said, yeah, certainly. She's going to sit right next to me. She said, come on. So, so he said, don't worry, she's in the safe hand. And that on the bus, they're going to ride together. Anyway, I was so starstruck that day, I have to say, because I just love the man, all his effort for justice. I put him on the same level as Muhammad Ali or MLK and people like that, because those people, they sacrificed and they lost a lot. So it was very fun night. I sat in that room, we chat, and basically Fela being Fela, he was just very jovial, very energetic. And the show was wonderful. I mean, we were there till like way 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. So I always cherish that. I was so starstruck, I forget to take a picture with him. Even if I did, it would have been very dark because we were in a dark room in upstairs. So anyway, so that was my experience with Fela Adekunle Kuti.
Okay, Sandra, your story, we want to hear this. Did you met in LA, right?
Yes, we met here in LA. As a matter of fact, Juno Lewis, drum maker, is the one who introduced me to Fela. He insisted that I meet Fela. So it was at the Ambassador Hotel. But, once again, I talk about it in my book. Yeah, so that was a very interesting evening. I mean, once I met Fela, from day one, we connected, and the rest is, history. The other thing, I think it was Somi who mentioned the fact that she was surprised to see all white musicians playing Fela's music. Mm-hmm. What I found is not so much white musicians, they're Latinos, usually the white horn players, but Latinos understand the rhythm a lot better than the African American. And I'm speaking from me trying to put a band together here in America to play Afrobeat. It's an easier road with a Latin musician. For some reason, they understand the rhythms a lot better than, say, our R&B musician or our blues musician, although Afrobeat has all those elements, and you mentioned SARS too, and that's something that I'm very passionate about at this particular time because, my second home is Nigeria. And it's a home that they've already threatened me and told me not to come back for speaking the truth. So what's happening there now, I just recently did a song entitled Oh My, which has to do with ending SARS and what happened October 20th at the Lekki toll gate, where those young innocent children were shot down and murdered by the, once again, dysfunctional, recycled, because that's what Nigeria has, a recycled government.
Recycled.
It's recycled, and these old, incompetent rulers, because they're not leading anyone anywhere, they need to go sit down. The reason why we train our children, we train and we teach our children, because at some point, we're going to have to hand those rings over to the children and let them lead and finish guiding the way. But I don't know, in Nigeria, the elders didn't get the memo that they need to go sit down and listen to the youth.
The change will come. The change is going to come. It's inevitable.
Okay, well, let me tell you, Michi, Omoyele Sowore was one of the first people to stand up not the first, but he was the one who started Revolution Now. And as a result, the End SARS movement has come behind him. And then what's going on around the world? Luiza mentioned her horrible president. Her horrible president, not only in Brazil, but Nigeria, America, England. So how far do we have to go to? Right now, it just seems to be across the board. All the heads in leadership seem to be questionable. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so just so that we stay on the same trail, I wanted to ask Osei as well. His earliest memory of coming across Fela's music.
Yeah.
For me, my earliest
Wait,
memory.
hold on, Bolaji, you can turn off your camera. You can turn off your camera.
I see. Okay.
So any work
Bolaji,
like modifications,
can you mute?
or whatever, it has to be approved by the architecture committee.
Oh dear.
I see.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, go on. Let me mute him. I've muted him.
No, I was gonna just say that for me, my uncle was a DJ growing up, and of course, a lot of you know, African house parties and things of that nature. So I just remember being introduced to the music at a very young age, in that setting, just because he would, you know, oftentimes, and I would help him carry his records at that time. So it kind of just sparked my interest in music as a whole. And I just remember, you know, just those experiences at a young age. So just overall in the, you know, the context of just hearing music, you know, he would play the records. So,
okay. I think for me, it was really just watching my father, I think when I was about 10 or 11, and he just used to sit down and listen to Fela's songs, and he would be laughing, having a good time. And I used to wonder, and I started DJing at a very early age, like from about 13. And I think as young Nigerians as well, we're very open to diverse music at a very, very young age. Like by 14, I was listening to jazz, going to jazz clubs, even though, you know, we weren't supposed to. I went to Fela's Shrine. I spent my 21st birthday at Fela's Shrine. And then I did a show when I was at the University of Lagos with Fela. So I've always been very, I mean, you can't be a Nigerian in my generation and not be connected to Fela's music in some way or form, because it was, like you said, you know, music of social change, of revolution. And during the times I was growing up in Nigeria, there was a lot of turbulence politically. We had coups upon coups and all of that. So yeah, this has been a great conversation. Osei, do you have any other questions?
No, this I think, Moji, we might have to do something else. You know, these conversations are kind of they're deep. So I just say that overall, I appreciate everybody just kind of, you know, really expressing yourselves and, you know, speaking on it. Luiza, I just want to thank you for creating this film. I think it's certainly it's edgy, it's groundbreaking. I love Fela. I think he is one of our heroes, one of our great heroes and revolutionaries. And I think I'd love to, you know, see if we could talk to Carlos later on, Moji. We might have to figure that out.
He really wanted to be part. Carlos, even Joel, they all emailed and apologized. Even Babatunde, I mean, he sent me a long email, the graphic artist, and said, oh, I really want to be a part of it, but I'm on set till 8 p.m. every night. And he's in Paris, so there's the time difference. And yeah,
absolutely.
So,
and Babatunde was the artist who also made the poster of the film.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yes, so we thought that there was nobody else that could possibly make that poster, you know, that would do justice. So I would like to, you know, credit him for that. He's also
that's fantastic.
Not only an incredible artist, but also a wonderful human being. So we really wanted him to be here, and Carlos and Joel as well.
Yeah.
Joel really wanted to be here. It's just
so we may have to have another conversation.
Tons of projects right now.
Send them all the best. Thank you.
Yeah, but before everybody loves off, I need inspiring words to upcoming creatives. Let's start with you, Sandra.
Okay, well, I don't know how inspiring this would be, but I would like to see tribalism in to the point that when people come together to make a movement collectively for us all, we stop looking at what tribe or what religion. We need to throw all of that out and come together as one people because we're all in this boat together.
Okay, we're all in this boat together.
Unity, unity.
Okay, Richard?
Yes, just, again, thank you guys for having me. This has been amazing. I really hope that this time together in this movie sparks, that unity amongst people of color that are originated from Africa, and look forward to participating in that movement and making it happen for the future.
Okay, thank you. Bolaji, could you put your camera up a bit? Okay, inspiring words for upcoming creatives. And you're on mute. Wait, let me unmute you. You're on mute.
Me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Oh,
Yes. Again, thank you very much for the invitations. I think this is need to continue because you have like minds and you can learn from each other and do things together. So, like I said earlier, people need to do things together as brothers and sisters, and hopefully we all can assist each other in different ways because we all have different skills, different backgrounds. So hopefully that continues, and I wish you best of luck on the screening of the movie.
And Luiza?
I would say, I think I'm pitching two conversations that were brought up in the film. One thing that Sandra says that she told Fela, she's like, there are so many problems in this world. Why would you sing about your soup? And in the closing, in one of the closing statements, Sandy, he says, we just have to keep on fighting. And that's my inspiring word is, if we have creativity, if we have talent, if we have some passion inside of us, make us purposeful towards something that is going to make real change in the world, because that's what we really need. We need real change.
Real change, yes, we do. And Osei?
I just want to encourage people to continue to just network. One of the things I find that Atlanta is an opportunity for specifically people of color to come together. You have some of the best and brightest minds from all over the world here, and we're all children of the diaspora. So I want to continue to push that because I think that's all of our opportunity. And I think, there's a lot of richness in that. So as to Sandra's point in terms of tribalism, we are a part of a greater tribe in terms of, that of humanity. So we need to try to figure out how we can operate in our truer purpose. And I think that that's what the world is on right now. So we need to lean into that.
Okay, so on that note, I know 2020, whew, it has been something. Woo, if anybody had told me that things would just keep going to the end of the year, I'd have said, But I think we all had some kind of intuition how this year was going to be, because if we look back to end of 2019, and we kind of look at how we went into 2020, I think we all kind of knew that something, I think this is a moment of global change. I think that's what's going on right now. So all I pray for all of us for 2020 is for it to be a year filled with joy, happiness, and love. Really and truly, that's what we need for 2021. I think that love has really been missing from, like Luiza said, when you talk about the government in Brazil, the government here, the government in Nigeria, I'm just like, where did these folks come from? And why are they so hate-filled? So we need some love and joy in 2021. So thank you very much, Luiza, Richard, Osei, thank you very much for making this happen. Sandra, I'm so happy I've connected with you. Bolaji, we keep not seeing your whole face, but that's okay. Thank you, Bolaji. Bolaji is one of our board members. Thank you for all being part of this conversation. I'm looking forward to other conversation. This is the end of we actually made it through doing this festival this year. We were hoping it was going to be a bigger thing, but because of Corona, we had to do it online. So this is the wrap up of the festival for 2020. We hope to see you all in 2021. Our call for submissions for films will be open in March. Go to our website, africanfilmfestatl.com. Sign up for our newsletter so you can be informed as to what we'll be doing next year. Thank you very much all for coming again, and stay safe. And hopefully we'll see physically in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maji.
Bye, Sandra. Speak to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Richard, Osei. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.